Good afternoon, everyone. How are we doing? Did we have a good lunch?
Definitely.
We got some carbs in us. We got some hydration. Now we're in the air conditioning. Life's sweet, life's sweet. So, for those that don't know, my name is Joshua Stacy. I'm the CEO of a small software company. Been self-employed for most of my life. Been playing with computers for basically as long as slightly before the internet got actually useful, I think would be a good way to put it. So for those that don't know, in the Las Vegas ecosystem, we've got a lot of folks that are like super excited about all sorts of things, but not everybody knows where to begin or what to do, or they might get stuck at points. And sometimes they come to me and they say, hey Josh, how can I build this thing? What should I do? And I spent a lot of time out in the, I spent a lot of time doing startup mentoring, which I like because it means instead of sitting there staring at the problems I have, I get to see what other people's problems are and help them with those and take a break from my own. So I will get started. So today we're going to talk about first principles of engineering. Show of hands. Raise your hand if you're like super technical.
Kind of.
Okay. Raise your hand if you're like, well, kind of technical. You know, you can program your VCR. Ha ha ha. So part of the challenge with Tech Alley sessions is there's a wide range of skills in the audience. And, you know, it's also nice to try to build a lot of value and have folks get something out of it. I'm a heavy extrovert, and I'm an extroverted engineer. Statistically, that happens very infrequently. What that means is I love being in a room full of people talking to them, and most engineers do not want to do that. That is their definition of hell. So one of the things that I want to do is put together a presentation that would help us sort of engage in critical thinking and start taking a look at things from first principles perspectives, which is not usually the way anything is taught virtually anywhere in, call it the structured engineering world, because they're designing for systems that large groups of people can integrate with, and then we can make these large, a lot of structured processes. But in that, a lot of innovation gets lost, and sometimes it's actually not the efficient way to do things. So, today's presentation. Now, one of the things that I do terribly at is making PowerPoints. I make my notes, and this way you guys can read my notes and keep track of what's going on. Later we'll get to it, and I do use pictures. See, there's a picture. I do include pictures. I put this together this morning. I spent a lot of time putting the thought behind it together and sort of figuring out where we're going to go. A big part of this presentation is hopefully going to be actually user engagement and viewer engagement and viewer interaction. And there's going to be some real hands-on thinking stuff. Hopefully by the time I get done today, you'll go, I have some thoughts now. Thoughts that you wouldn't have otherwise had. So why are we doing today's presentation? Well, lots of people have ideas of things they want to build, but they might not know where to start. And lots of people have some solutions to a problem, but not all of the problem. Others are semi-technical or tech curious, and they're not sure sort of how to begin or where to start or where to frame things. And this last group, as I was going through with ChatGPT working on the verbiage for the slides, it said, hey, you might want to add this last part. And I did. That's why it's there. It says some of you are already building, but might not be sure if you're actually solving the right problem. And so first principles engineering happens well before you hit the keyboard to start building the thing, and way before you start talking to vendors and suppliers. It starts by really breaking down the problem. So what is engineering? It's applying things like math and science to solving real problems. I love this. I love this so much. So it's how we take ideas, thoughts, whatever else, and turn them into things that are actually used. Someone goes, hey, I need to, oh man, wouldn't it be great if I could order things through the internet instead of waiting 6 to 8 weeks to come from a catalog? That's how we sort of get here. And to put it another way, engineering is first principles engineering, I screwed up, is understand the problem, then build the solution. Sometimes people do the build the solution first. Okay, now we'll do the first principles engineering. So, first principles, you think, oh, well, what are the first principles? And the question is, you don't know. And you go, well, that's not very helpful, Josh. Well, the first principles are the fundamental truths. So we've got some examples I'll go through. I'm going to run through this at sort of a high level, and we're going to get real nitty gritty. I have 3 examples. I don't know that we'll even get through all 3 because there's frankly enough meat on the bone, so to speak, where we could spend a lot of time diving in on the first one. And really what I'm trying to do is walk through a lot of sort of the thought exercise here. Now, I'll go back a few slides here to the very first one. You say, okay, Josh, you're the CEO of a company. That's neat. Well, what does that actually mean and what do you do? A lot of what I'm doing over the years, so one of the kind of the flagship project with BigTB is the Project 1000. It's an effort to launch 1,000 products over 10 years. Most of them are stinkers. We expect that to be the case. In the last 4 years, we've launched around 250, and we've had about 7 of them reach commercial success, meaning they've made us money. If you consider some companies spend 7 years trying to get one product line commercially viable, the fact that we've been able to do 7 in 4 years, although they're smaller numbers, it shows that we are refining and nailing certain processes. And so a lot of what I spend time doing is what we're talking about here today, which is that first principles engineering. And the reason why that is so important is if I'm looking at an industry that already exists, I want to go into, and there's 3 examples we'll go over today: food delivery, ride share, and property rentals. If I'm looking at an industry and I say, I think there's an opportunity for me there, what might it be? How would I get to that? You got to have a way of looking at it. So you might think, well, Josh, if you're the CEO of a software company, you probably spend a lot of time in a code editor. No, I do not. I do spend time on it. I don't. So it certainly is a part of it. It's just, it's a lot of times it's the scaffolding around the solution. So first step, you break down the fundamentals of the issue. What is it that you're really trying to solve, right? A lot of people have different ideas. They see a problem, and they're maybe solving a part of a problem, but they're not looking at the whole ecosystem. If that doesn't quite make sense yet, don't worry. We're going to use some examples. It'll get super clear. Probably the biggest knot of first principles engineering is not sticking with the way things have always been done. And I don't mean that in some reckless, abandoned, well, if that's the way they've been doing it, we need to presuppose it's the wrong way of doing it. Maybe it's the right way of doing it. We don't know. They've been doing it that way for a while. Maybe that makes a lot of sense. But mindlessly copying stuff that's already been done, that's definitely a big no-no. So let's get started. Sentence I use a lot, and I repeat a lot, I reinforce, is that all good engineering starts with a good problem statement. So we're just about to the part where we're going to need some audience participation, or at least welcome it. And so if you would like to either raise your hand or come on down, you can do that. If you raise your hand, we'll get this going. So, food delivery. So if all good engineering starts with a good problem statement, what's a good statement of a problem with food delivery? Here is the question. All right, what's our first problem statement?
With food delivery?
With the food delivery industry, what's the...
First problem.
Literally like any problem. What we're trying to do is so like, I'll give you some examples here, right? When I look at it, the very first, well, so let's back up a bit. Usually, you're going to go through a lot of iterations of the problem statement. Mm-hmm. And so I try to have an opinion. I come by it honestly. I think it's too damn expensive. I would like to be able to sit in my underwear on my couch and have someone bring me food and not have it cost $50 every time. That's what I would like. Now, there's other problems, right? A part of what we're trying to do is boil it down not just to what's one problem and dig in on that, but what's a good problem statement. I think that saying it's too expensive is an incomplete answer. All right.
I would say delivering to apartment buildings. I don't know.
Okay, so delivering to apartment buildings is a problem. We got challenges there. We got another one. What's that?
The traffic nowadays.
That's right. You got people trying to get over and get me my food.
And don't forget about the 2 lanes is always open at Walmart. It's only about 2 of them. You got to go through self and a line around the corner.
There you go.
This is an issue that you got to change. So what you're talking about on the statement, problem statement, is basically something that needs to be changed.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's the thing about it.
All right, we got another one back here. What's a good problem statement for food delivery?
Maybe people ordering to the wrong address. I've had people order food.
Inaccurate
yeah.
deliveries,
Yeah.
wrong food. All right. Now, if you gave us one, I want you to keep thinking on it because we're going to drill down on these. We got any other? Okay, we got another one. Lively crowd today. Love to see it. Love to see it.
The driver sampling the food.
Oh, the driver sometimes gets hungry and wants to take a self-comp a tip of carbohydrates.
Delivery time, keeping food hot and fresh.
Okay, sometimes it takes too long to get there.
And I think recognizing what is a problem that's actually feasibly workable, solvable, as opposed to just another part of the human condition, which is just spinning the wheels.
Right, so sometimes we've got problems that are we can't get around. So I'm gonna tell you, this has been great already. Let's take what we've got so far here. I'm gonna walk through some of where I might do this. So as a premise, my wife says, and sticking with the theme of food, that my mouth is already full, so to speak, and that I probably shouldn't add another products to the things that I'm doing. I really want to do a food delivery app, really bad. What's that?
You want to do it fully?
Very bad.
Okay, we're gonna talk. I got something to add.
That's great, because all I need is one person other than me, and then the equation changes. Because I'm like, no, now I'm helping Tom with it or whatever. So at this stage of the problem, right, we say, okay, well, we've got some problems here. We've identified. What I would normally do, now we're doing this in just a little 1 hour session, that's fine. I would get like a Google Doc or a spreadsheet going, and I'd write all of these out. And I would talk to anybody who would listen. And my wife, she gets a kick out of this. I'll talk to her. I would go out to eat. I'll be like, hey, I got a quick question for you. It's not what's good on the menu, obviously everything. That's why we came here. But what are your problems with food delivery? So when we do that, if we lay everything out, we start to notice sometimes some themes and some groupings of problems. So part of it, I would say, based off what we talked about, is logistics. We've got the traffic, we've got the food going bad potentially, or not staying the way we would like it. We've got another one of the sampling, you know, take that sort of, I think would be under like the food safety type. And so you start noticing these patterns. So what's first principles? And I'm going to be very repetitive here. First principles is boiling it down and saying, well, what are the big problems? So I'll catch you guys. We'll hit the fast forward button for those that used to watch those cooking shows where they're like, we're going to dice the onions. And they're like, here's what they look like when they come out of the oven. So now we're going to fast forward a bit and say we got down this. I say, well, I've got some solutions. One of the problems that I have, my problem is it's too damn expensive. Now, as I've thought of that, I had a solution I thought of before we came here, if I'm being honest. And it addresses some of the problems that have also been raised already without even thinking on it. Some of how you can realize you're likely coming to a good solution is on its own, it's starting to solve other problems. So for those that are familiar with the concept of a headless website, it's a website that does, or so those that are not familiar with it, it's a website that has no front end. You can't see it. And if you think about like a restaurant having a front end, that's their, like the retail space. You go, you sit down, the dining area. And I thought, if I order a sandwich from a shop, I'm not enjoying the ambiance of the way that they've set everything up. I'm not going to use their restroom. And so why would I want to order from a restaurant that has all of that baked into their costs? Why wouldn't I just want to order from a kitchen basically that just makes food? And so that would reduce the cost of the food being created quite a bit. And if it was just going direct to a delivery driver, that would help deal with some of the efficiencies on it. The other thing is, if it's specifically a food delivery app, I thought, well, what if people, you know, it's nice to be like, I'm going to be hungry in an hour. I could go for some Thai, I guess. But if people the day before or in the morning could say, oh, I'd like this, that, or the other thing, we could actually optimize the delivery routes so the driver can go to the shop, pick up all of the orders, or as many as would make sense, and then go and drop them all off sequentially. And now we're driving the cost of actually delivering the food down quite a bit, and we've lowered the cost of the food. And we've secondarily solved some of these other problems. And so when we're taking a look at problems like this, you know, one of the things that I think is important at this stage of an idea is you don't want to commit to an idea just yet. You're going to start seeing some ideas and have some tendencies where you're going to be, oh, I like this. But I usually set somewhat of a timeline on it, and it's gotten compressed over the time. But I try to say, I don't want to throw out any ideas, no matter how ridiculous they might seem at the time, because I don't know what other threads I'm going to pull on and maybe I'm going to arrive at some new insights. So as that's been going on, does anybody else have any other problem statements or refined problem statements? I see one pre-verbal tension. Oh, yes. All right, I'm going to go to the back first, and then we'll go up one.
Yeah, with all these private kitchens and things and maximizing efficiency, you're going to be carrying liability insurance in case you start poisoning people that you're delivering food to?
Undocumented feature. You might get weight loss from eating something you shouldn't. Okay, so you bring up an interesting point. Now I'll say, here's a refinement I had on the idea. There's a lot of restaurants that at night, the kitchens are just sitting there doing nothing. Nothing! And what if we were making this food at night? The restaurant would already have the insurance. They'd already have that all taken care of, and we'd be able to go to a restaurant owner and say, how'd you like to make some money off your kitchen at night? Wouldn't that be neat? Well, again, this is why I try to not get too hung up on a solution yet. I want to keep it very fluid because we uncover things. All right, we've got another either new or refined problem statement here.
So I just thought of a new idea, but there's a lot of different food options. What if there was a way that it would suggest options based off like the food that you like or restrictions and stuff like that, like a food service? You know what I mean?
So what if based off of what you've ordered before, what you share with it, it wants things? Well, this is where it goes almost to the idea of maybe I'm thinking now like a private kitchen.
Yeah.
Right? Because it's like, it's based off of what you're, now most of us like basically similar things. And so, yeah, absolutely. Okay, I got another hand raised, another refined or new problem statement. Aren't problem statements fun? I'm a sick man to love this kind of stuff.
Me, I'm an engineer. I'm a natural designer. I just create things, you know. So when I look at things like that, and I looked at them in the past of being unsafe as far as on health issues, dealing with different people handling your food. You never know what people's doing. So I came up with basically like a heat band, basically that is retailed out into the stores in the different markets of the companies that's actually corporations that's buying out these different companies that's having the deliveries being done. So basically the band basically shows if it's tamper proof or something like that, and it basically it shows the heat and temperature of the food, things like that, and the cost effective of it is basically just based off of just the heating systems just of the food itself. You know what I mean? It's just a band, like a adhesive band shows that it hasn't been tampered with. So I had seen like ones that they put on there like the tape and things. So that's like one of the things that actually needs to be changed. That's a problem delivery in that type of food market. But what I want to talk to you about more since we was on this type of subject is that I do have something that I'm working with Jeff Hoffman with, you know, that I created, you know.
Cool. Well, I don't
with
know.
the food delivery thing.
How about that? How about that?
So, you know,
All right. Well,
we can go.
so now we've taken an interesting plot twist here. I'm going to go on a little bit of we got a side thought here. So, a number of months back, someone presented on a electronic device that was sort of like a tracking device for a container. And what they would do is they'd say, here, if you buy this device, we'll transmit heat, temperature, did it fall over, all of these different things, GPS coordinates, whatever. And the problem is it's kind of expensive per unit. So you wouldn't want to do it on like a small thing like that.
The manufacturing of it would be up there because everybody charges for the spine.
So let's pull on this thread a little bit though.
About the health concerns. It's just like, hey, this is community effort.
So let's say you're hungry. Now raise your hand if you get hungry more than once a week. I get hungry more than once a day, if I'm honest. And so one of the things I was thinking about was, okay, food delivery, part of the natural human condition is just things need to be taken places or they won't be there. That's sort of how it is. But there's nothing intrinsically, there's no significant lift on bringing, right, what does one meal weigh? A pound? 2 pounds? 3 pounds? So what if a delivery driver was bringing more than one meal? All right, you say, okay, bring me my meals for the next day or 2 or 3 or whatever it is. Now the dollar amount might justify the temperature readings and all of the transport costs, and there's a reusable, returnable, depositable item, and now you know where it went. Literally, you can check how it went from the store directly to your door, what temperatures it had, if the case was open, all that other stuff. Okay, I suspect that if we're looking for trying to lower costs, we might be going in the other direction now because we're adding some expensive hardware and whatever else. But that, again, we're still at that sort of, let's figure out the problem and look at different solutions for different problems. And then usually as I go through this process, I'll find myself in a situation where I go, I know what I want to do now. And when I have that clarity, I get really excited. And then I start looking for the tools to build it. Then I start trying to figure out all of these other things once I really understand the problem. All right, who's ready to do another problem? You guys did so well with this one. Okay. So, okay, I had a nice slide here to go over all of the stuff we just went over. We'll stick with the slides. It's a good slide. I like it because I made it. So, when you're looking at this, what am I solving? Frequently it's important to figure out what are we solving for. So there's goals, things that we're trying to solve for, and there's constraints, limitations we have. Maybe we're using as a constraint, for example, when I'm working at BigTB, we have limitations on the types of technologies that we would use. We have limitations on certain things, and so we try to work within those constraints. But also, like, what are your goals? Like, one of the things I'd like on this is I'd like to see delivery drivers getting paid more. Now, a lot of businesses look to limit expenses, and I don't mean this from any particularly egalitarian perspective, but I think that the person bringing the food is doing a valuable service. They should be able to make money at it. And so when I take a look at the solutions that we're looking at, if we optimize delivery routes, we can increase the value that the driver is bringing without them driving more miles, which means the value they're bringing to the eco chain, or the ecosystem, there we go, ecosystem or supply chain. My brain's like, eco chain, that's not a word. It helps us sort of understand where we're driving to. Okay, so there's that. Now what about rideshare? Right, now I'll give you a little background. When I'm doing a project, sometimes I'll have a little design brief or I'll have some idea where I'm going with this. Rideshare drivers, Uber, Lyft, and the others, a lot of them are getting like 50% or less of the actual fee that's being paid. Now, at this point, right, so let's roll back the clock. If you're early Uber, no one knew what Uber was. We didn't even know what this concept of rideshare was. And so the market's used to it now. We're familiar with this on both sides. The riders and the drivers, we're familiar with this. And so what's been happening is that market's been maturing is the ones that are the incumbent, Lyft, Uber, and I guess there's others too, they've been ratcheting up what they've been taking because they want to be making more money. Okay, that's fine. However, at the end of the day, they're really just providing a marketplace. And so when I put on my BigTB hat and I say, how would I tackle this? One of the ways I could tackle this, it's real easy for us to make a two-sided marketplace. Now, there's a number of different considerations that Uber will do, right? They've got some safety checks and they settle the transactions and they make sure the drivers have insurance or whatever. But let's be honest, I'm a freedom-loving guy. If my driver has an older car, that's between me and them. They have insurance, that's between them and the government. I kid. But conceptually, when we take a look at the constraints that the current ride shares are operating in, this is a little different. Because we're not just saying, well, what are the ways that we could do it? We can take a look at the way the existing constraints with the way that the current incumbents are, right? This is what I spend a lot of my time doing, is saying, I want to eat Uber's lunch. I want to eat Lyft's lunch. I want to eat Airbnb's lunch. So what are they doing poorly and how can I exploit that? And if their fulfillment arm of their market is the delivery drivers, or is the drivers, and the drivers are getting paid less and less, that's a problem for Uber, because if I had a solution where I was taking 10% of it, why would a driver work with Uber anymore? And there's answers to that question. We're going to dig in on that a little bit. But like that's sort of the mindset on it, is say, okay, well, one challenging question is, does Uber need to take 50%? And I don't mean that like eat the rich, do they need to be taking 50%? But is there a business case and argument for why they are doing that? Is the insurance that they're offering, the matchmaking service that they're offering, and all of this stuff actually so challenging and expensive that it justifies the cost? The answer? Maybe. I don't know. Now, I will say that after several years of doing this type of work, I can make some pretty quick guesses that are usually close to accurate without having to dive too deep into it. But with that said, we're going to do another round of problem statements. So the question is, we're looking for problem statements for the rideshare industry. So what's a good problem? Now, I'll start with one. I think that delivery or the drivers getting paid less and less is a problem. I think that it means that the value that the customers are getting is decreasing, and the compensation that the folks offering the service is, the equation's getting skewed as that market's maturing, and that's creating opportunity. All right, raise your hand if you got a problem statement for me. All right, we'll start at the beginning again. Start at the front here again.
It's allowing everybody, I think, not exactly regardless of background, but there are people like, I don't even think this thing actually works.
So it does work. That's so so it works for YouTube. So this gets recorded, and that mic goes to the recording.
Sorry.
So if, for example, this lovely person said something, no one in YouTube will hear it. I'm sorry to say.
So speak up. Is what you said.
Yeah. Or here's the other thing. You can use both.
Hold on, I'm trying to remember what my problem statement was now. Okay. It's also potentially taking away jobs from people that work for taxi companies, and also that's a huge, I think they've been having lawsuits for like years trying to be like, you're not allowed to do that, all that.
All right, so I don't use this mic because I got one clipped here. So what about the taxi drivers? So I will say where I sit is typically I view the taxi companies as the gatekeeping incumbents that want to screw everyone, and I'm the live free or die, let's take them out kind of guy. And then Uber and Lyft were like, yeah, let's get the man. And then they're like, we like being the man now that we can be the man. That's right. But taxis are out there. That's another piece that's something definitely worth considering. What other problem statements do we have?
Dealing with rideshare and Uber, I can hear it. I'm good. Basically, what I would say is insurance. They should adjust the insurance for people who are actually the drivers for their car because of the wear and tear on their vehicles, because they're getting a % out of it. So they should actually give a % back, to be able to give them money to fix their essentials dealing with their vehicle, because wear and tear, after a while your car gets running bad, and then you got to take it in, and the money that you've been making off of doing Uber and stuff is basically back into your ignition.
Yeah, well, and that's a real problem with the Uber model, the rideshare model, is it does require the rider or the driver to have a piece of equipment that's going to wear down over time, and there's going to be expenses associated with that. And when Uber does not have that expense, this sounds like a down with Uber TED Talk. It's not really where I'm trying to go with it.
Well, it should be adjusted to their insurance.
But like
to their personal insurance, where they're getting a rebate back, basically, and what it's doing is dropping the price on whatever they're dealing with to be able to fix.
Well, I mean,
Or their cars.
they
got it split up.
In a broader sense, I think
this is insurance and endurance.
Yeah, well, and I think maybe like a service plan, right? All right. So what other problem statements do we have? All right, here we go.
As a business owner, I've always asked the question, how much would I need to pay somebody for them not to look for another job? And my estimation is $35 an hour. And for the risk that they take, I actually had assumed that that's what they were probably making, is around $35 an hour, sort of like a trucker. So to me, you design a model that you can do that, and everything else will kind of fix itself. But that's my personal take, is you don't put people, that employees are 1099s that are part of your business and have them risk their life for how little they're making. It's just bad business.
All right, so we can take that. That's a great problem statement, right? What the problem of is it survivable, right? So if your business relies on folks making less than minimum wage after they fix their car, it might not last super long.
So what I was thinking about is that the business model for Uber is not that the drivers are going to make as much profit or in sharing the profit as we, the developers of the concept. When you were saying at $35 an hour, if that's, and you're still getting the other, 65% or whatever it is, that we don't raise that percentage just because it's fair. I started the business, I'm going to make all the money.
Okay, we've got another problem statement, I think.
This is a deep path because I was a CFO for a rideshare startup that was going to compete against Uber. So, and I'm not trying to say I'm an expert, but I know both sides of the story. Uber started out with prices low because they thought the autonomous vehicle, they didn't care about their drivers, so they thought it would be all automatic. Now the problem is we're not there yet. So what we found very quickly is we had a higher end service, and we tried to address, Uber puts billions into marketing. So we were trying to address that by saying, okay, if you're a driver and you share it, we were going to take that marketing dollar and actually make residual income for the drivers and also for the customers. So the Uber model is the insurance is not possible in the US right now. When they take 50% of it, if you look at what they're not making much money, that was the biggest issue, is overcoming that insurance for that vehicle. And then the next step beyond that is a lot of the safety issues. So I think we have the methodology for competing with them on a higher level, but the insurance, I mean, for years, they just started making money a few years ago. And as a startup to compete with them, the dollars on the insurance, your personal policy does not cover it. So what Uber does is they have a policy to cover you. When you get the call, you're going to pick up the rider. That's one policy. When they get in the car, it's another policy that's even more expensive. So insurance in the U.S. is the biggest obstacle to cover right now. If you
the insurance basically is for the impact if it was an accident or something.
well, it's rider safety.
Not for the engine itself. Or
Right.
the transmission or
Right.
something.
So it's a very tough market to compete in, and I've read all the financials of all the companies for many years, and if you look at Uber, 91% of the drivers who are driving today will not be driving next year. So that driver turnover is massive, and now you cannot make an income driving for Uber. You can't make a good living because of all those additional costs.
All right, so now we're going to step to the fast forward a little bit. So this has been some great discussion. So I have thought through this one a little bit ahead of time, if I'm honest. I'm not as excited about this one as the food delivery one because I can just stay at home. But even if I stay at home, I get hungry. So that's why I like the food delivery app. As James was mentioning, the insurance is a real issue with this one. Now, in the wake of Uber, there have been changes with the ways that insurance market works, to the point where there are some insurers that offer individual insurance policies for rideshare drivers specifically that are priced in a way where, but now that's shouldered on the driver, not on Uber itself. And the insurance company is tailoring that risk specific for that driver. The other thing is, in, for example, Las Vegas, we have specific rideshare permits, licensing, whatever, at the airports and different things like that. So at a local level and regional level, there's actually infrastructure for this stuff. So my best thought on this, as far as I was looking at it, is if I was going to carve out something and try to say I'll take a 10% rake, I don't need a 50%, I would have to shift most, if not all of that, back onto the driver, and it would be doing a marketplace where it's between the driver and the passenger. And I don't know if the consumers would view that as an improvement or not, but as you go through it, what you start to find is Well, that insurance thing's actually really kind of an issue. The reason why it's such an issue is if you have personal insurance, it will not cover you under a ride for hire. It's a completely different risk. If you are giving someone a ride and it's for hire and there's an accident, they're not going to pay shit. And that's a real risk. And so that does create problems. And that does invite and beg the question, how does one tackle that? So as we may have noticed, I think we've done a pretty good dive on some of the problems with this. We haven't gotten a code editor out. We haven't looked at our technology stack. We've been looking really and saying, like, what are the problems that we're solving? Now, on the rideshare, part of what the problem that's being solved is, one of the ways that you could maybe take a look at tackling it is just doing route planning a little bit. And like, I think Lyft did this a little bit, maybe Uber too, where they'd be like, well, there's this guy going here and this other person going there. So if we pick them up here and pick this other person up there and then drop them off here and drop them down there, now we've got more butts and more seats paying fares, so it's a lower rate for everyone. So that's one angle for attacking that. So, so if I was going to do a rideshare app, one of the opportunities that I see, I would take a look at Uber and Lyft. Obviously, those are the big ones, and I'd say, what are their weak points? And one of their weak points is that your car has to be at least a certain age in order to use the service, and that makes sense. You don't want cars breaking down. But on the other hand, especially right at the edge of their cutoff window, there's a lot of perfectly serviceable cars. If you got a 98 Civic and it still runs, right? You got 150K miles on a 98 Civic, you're still good. And, maybe you're just trying to get down to the 7-Eleven for a Slurpee. You don't necessarily need to worry. You're not bringing your newborn home from the hospital. It doesn't need to be. So when you look around sort of the totality of the problem, one of the things that I think in this particular arena, I don't know what the actual problem would be being solved. Because when I look at it, and this is discussion sort of, you say, well, what would actually be better than what's existing now? And if you have to deal with all of these constraints, maybe it's problematic, maybe it's not. So let me ask you this before we do our third and final example. The question is, do you feel like you better understand how to attack a problem from a first principles perspective? So by show of hands, has what I've been saying here been helpful and insightful? Do we better understand first principles now? Okay, we got a few. That's great. All right. So for our third and final one, what about property rentals? I'll give you some background on this. You got Zillow, you got apartments.com, you got a lot of rental listings out there, and it's a huge market. I'll tell you at least one problem, and that's the economics on it. A lot of times property rental companies are spending a significant amount of money just trying to keep people in the rented units. And if they had perfect market cap, or I think it's rental capitalization, their cap rate, if they had 100% cap rate, they'd make more money, obviously, than if, for example, I was in a rental until about 7 months ago. And after we moved out, that rental stayed empty for 6 months because they were charging too much. That's why we left. They figured that out over time. And so they ended up losing like half a year of rent on something because it was vacant. So that's a real problem. Another problem is there's a lot of folks who can, one problem is breaking leases is a problem. A lot of people, sometimes they like each other and they want to live together, and the relationship ends at a time that's different than when the lease ends. And that becomes immensely awkward for a number of reasons. And they're both like, but I don't have, so anyway. So one of the provisions that I thought just sort of, right, you imagine a giant whiteboard and we're just writing out all of the ideas. There's no such thing as a bad idea at that stage. One of the ideas would be sort of like a lover's clause where it's like, if you guys break up and you're in a 2-bedroom and you want to each go to a 1-bedroom with no fee, now we can help facilitate so exactly. And so I don't know that that's actually a big enough problem in the totality of the ecosystem, but I do know that apartments changing over is a problem. The other thing is, when someone moves, okay, raise your hand if you think moving's a pain in the ass. Okay, some people don't. I don't know why. Maybe they just can't hear me. So I think it's a huge pain in the ass. And part of that is because you have to move all your stuff. And if you've got something like a couch, or maybe you sleep on a bed, I sleep on a bed, that thing's a pain to move. Can't just throw it in the back seat of the car. And so there's a lot of secondary expenses associated with it. And in other countries, sometimes like they'll leave the furniture with the house. So if you move into a place, it's going to have the couch, it's going to have the TV, it's going to have the whatever. That's sort of one way of dealing about it. So when we're thinking about problem statements, right, let's start with problem statements. All good engineering comes from a good problem statement. I think one of the problems with sort of the property rental industry from the perspective of the renters is, one, there's a lot of other transactions associated with it. You've got to change your utilities, you got boxes everywhere, maybe your friend moved recently and they're sharing boxes, you never have enough tape, and then when you move, you have all these fucking boxes, and like no one else is moving, you just got a box fort going and you don't know. So there's all these problems around the moving that are problematic, and this is why I bring this one up, is it's not just about make another Zillow or make another apartments.com, but sort of, so with that as sort of the primer, what are some good problem statements we have for this space? We've got problems with people, yeah, does anybody have any? Okay, I'm gonna head all the way up in the back here.
The number one problem one should prepare for is government regulation, interference, policies that affect the business. For example, there was a beautiful 1928 office building on Sunset Boulevard in the heart of Hollywood. We used to lease there. And then, let's see, the city decided they would take the hands off the homeless. They would impose a gross receipts tax, and all the businesses started leaving because there was a gross receipts tax, no deductions, not cost of goods, cost of electric, cost of utilities, off the top. And that's coming out of your net, and most businesses net is 10%. So 10 times. And then of course, the whole businesses left. Went from business after business after business to for rent, for sale, for lease, boarded up, for total devastation. Sunset Boulevard went from a busy pedestrian business district to tent city. And when we got out of there 10 years ago, happily, to this day, that building's still never been re-rented. 10 years. Okay, so government interference and regulations can have a lot of effects that you should consider ahead of time.
You don't need to sell me on the fact that the government's the enemy. That's why I ran to be a state lawmaker, and 28% of the people in SD6 were like, send that feral guy down to Carson City. So, what other problem statements do we have?
I have one. I think a big problem with especially rental properties comes down to the deposit. Even like Airbnbs is when you pay a deposit for the cleaning fee. Even if you clean it, you still get charged the fee. You know what I mean? I feel like that's a big problem, and that could deter people from wanting to rent again. It's happened to me at least.
Yeah, I've had the weirdest experiences with cleaning the deposits. Places I've left objectively destroyed, they're like, here's your full deposit back. I'm like, okay, guys. And places that I thoroughly clean, they're like, all right, there's like we're gonna keep like $400. I'm like, that's not cool, man. You should be like those other guys. But yeah, like it does create a problem. Like those deposits. I mean, that's a real problem, right? So let's talk about the deposit. Why does the deposit exist? All right, first month, last month, and then 1 month is a security. Okay, like I don't think a lot of folks are doing that anymore. But like from the renter's perspective, right? Let's say I've got a $400,000 house, and renters have all of these wonderful protections, and they're gonna give me like $1,500 a month. And if they don't pay, I have very limited teeth on it, and I could lose money. I'm risking a very valuable asset. They could completely destroy it, and there's, yeah, and so that's a good. So sometimes I find when I'm working on problem statements, I find a really good problem statement because I don't have a good solution for it right off the top. I'm like, oh man. All right, so how do we deal with deposits, right? How do we facilitate trust from the renters and also from the folks that are renting the property? All right, what other problem statements we have? Okay.
Well, out in Indianapolis, I had a bunch of properties. I had like 16 properties, you know. And one of the problem statements that I seen, what made me start getting rid of them, is the security on the properties when they're empty. And how the squatters and people can move into your house, and by court law, you got to go through the entire process and pay for it in order to even get them out. And if they start adding different attachments to it, you might have to pay them. And I went through that dealing with one of my properties. Guy moved in. It was a house with a lot. He started building a fence with the lot. He knew the whole thing that who was on about the parcel and everything. And started raising the ceilings and all this stuff. And I had to go through the whole process to get him out. When I went back over there, they was gone. But the situation is, I spent money for no reason.
Yeah, I mean, you got a lot of risks with that, right?
There wasn't no refunds or nothing. There no one was ever accountable for it. It was like, whatever. They kicked the door down, whole new door up and everything.
All right, so fast forward a little bit on this one. This one is also covered by a lot of local ordinances. So part of what makes this one a little bit of a nightmare for me to want to tackle is it is so regional. There are state-specific issues. The best conclusion I came to on this one, in terms of my own musings, is I think it would be more along the lines of sort of to deal, right? Actually, let's back up a little bit. Part of the challenge is people move in this country more than they do basically anywhere else in the world, and with greater frequency, more and more over time. I originally am from New York. For those that don't know, that's on the other side of the country. Along the way, I've lived in Virginia, I've lived in Utah, I lived in LA, and I live in Vegas. I've traveled a bunch. So one of the ideas that I had is there's probably people that are in different cities that want to move around a bit. And if it was more of a group ownership where you say, okay, I pay into this and I can stay at, let's say you buy one housing credit, as it were, and one credit means you can stay at any one of the properties, and you can swap them around or whatever. Now we're dealing with, for example, and I forget, it doesn't really matter, but I'm going to ask, gentlemen, what's your first name, if you don't mind?
Mine?
Yeah. Hector. So let's say Hector and I were part of this co-op, and I'm here in Vegas and he's over in LA, and we want to swap. A lot of the problems that we've discussed, him and I could just settle. Okay, I'm gonna move. You like the couch? Great. You keep the couch, I'll keep that couch. We swap it around. There's not a lot of unnecessary expenditure with moving the furnitures around and doing all these other things, and it facilitates a smoother transaction overall. So that's sort of where I ended up on this one as I sort of kicked through it, is I think dealing with the housing transaction and the fact that people move around now kind of an increasingly amount, I think that's more where the problem is. Okay, so I'll close with this. Mastery comes from practice. The title of this was Mastering First Principles. And you might think, well, I don't think we're going to be a master after the first session. And you're right. You will not. It comes through the practice of doing. That's a part of why we went through 3 different examples, sort of dug through it and looked at it from different angles. The whole premise of this is to say, you might have a business idea that you're working on or a problem you're working on, and you think, oh, I need to go find some expert. And the answer that I would give you is become the expert. Now, I say that as somebody who is on the gifted end of the intelligence spectrum and has had a fair bit of professional success applying that, but I can tell you with a fact, I've seen a lot of folks of all sorts of different capabilities. It doesn't really matter. When you see someone really sink their teeth into something, they get so much brighter than everybody else that's going after it because they're super fucking engaged. And so for me, part of what I think makes me able to do the work that I do is I love sinking my teeth into something. I'm very competitive, and if I get my eye on something and I lock in on it, it's very satisfying for me. And so one of the goals for this presentation here today was to help encourage the community to really have some framework of understanding of saying, like, let's take a look at it. Now, I know there's some people in the audience I know, I work on all sorts of things. Sometimes I say, man, I wonder if they know what problem they're solving. And they do, they know a lot of it. It's not like they don't know the whole thing. But a lot of times I find when you dig deeper, and this is why I like first principles, boil it down to the beginning. What problem is being solved? All good engineering starts with a good problem statement. The end. All right, thank you everyone. For those that don't know, the session was demo time, and we're still going to do some demo times here and there. However, when we're not doing demos, we're going to be doing like building workshops, helping folks get engaged, and then we didn't use the whole slot here, and a part of that's intentional, partially because I don't want to wear everybody out. Interesting. I don't know that I'm an hour and 15-minute worth interesting. However, there's some other cool people here. You guys might like each other. Feel free to network in, whatever else. So with that, thank you all for attending, and enjoy the rest of Tech Alley.